everybody. My name is Aurore. I'm a privacy counsel in the F department of the French Data Protection Authority, and I'm with
Erik Boucher. I am an IT expert for the CNIL, also specialized for the health sector.
So we will talk to you about GDPR and how it applies to AA solution, either in the development phase or the deployment when you're using it. The main things you have to know is that when you're developing or using an AA solution, generative or not, it may implies processing of personal data. And where personal data is involved, then the GDPR applies. The CNIL already have developed a doctrine concerning how GDPR applies to AA solution. We have published 12 practical sheets concerning giving you advice on how to apply this. The main things, I will begin again. You have several questions to ask yourself when you're developing or using an AA solution. The thing is that GDPR applies, as I say, when you're processing personal data. This personal data could be either directly identifying or indirectly identifying, such as pseudonymized data. In practice, GDPR is not the only regulation that applies when you're developing or using an AA solution. So the first question and the second question, when you have answered the question, do I process personal data, is my processing legal? And for this question, you need first to find a legal basis, which are developed in Article 6 of the GDPR. Consent could be a legal basis, following a legitimate interest also. And then your third question will be, do I process sensitive data? And especially as we are in the AA Summit for Health, do I process health data? In this case, the GDPR says that processing personal sensitive data is forbidden, but there is always exception. For example, consent of the individual or scientific research is also a possibility. When dealing with sensitive data, the GDPR says that member states can add conditions for processing sensitive data. And the French legislature decided to seize this opportunity and to create what we call formality. They were already existing before the GDPR, but they are still applying now. The main question you have to ask yourself when to know if formalities apply or not is, do I process personal health data concerning health, and especially personal data concerning people, individual residing in France? Then, do my processing involves or is in the health sector? If those two conditions are met, then you are under the scope of the CNIL, the French Data Protection Law, and the CNIL's formalities. This principle is quite easy. Either you are compliant with one of our standards, and then you notify your compliance on our website, or you're not compliant with one of our standards for one or more reasons, and then you need to request for an authorization from the CNIL. The next question will be what's the purpose of my processing is, because the GDPR says that every processing must follow a purpose that is determined, explicit, and legitimate. We are very well aware that sometimes defining a purpose when developing an AA solution could be difficult, so we distinguish between two cases. First one, when you're developing your AA system, you have an idea of the intended use, for example, for the healthcare system. Then we consider that the purpose is determined, explicit, and legitimate. When you're not very sure of what your AA system will do or will not do, this is specifically the case for general purpose AA system, then we understand, you have to ask yourself what my AA solution is, what my AA solution will do and will not do, and what are the most common risks that my AA solution could imply. This is the two main cases that we have already discussed, and you can find all the doctrine on our website. There is a special case because sometimes when you want to develop an AA solution, you need to create a data set in order to reuse this data set for developing your AA solution. In this case, building this data set for scientific research could be considered as okay, and we already issued a standard concerning data warehouse, which are processing where we gather large amounts of data in order to reuse this data for further use, especially developing. Case one could be concerned by CNIL formalities, and also when you're creating a data set, could be also submitted to CNIL's formalities. The scientific research benefits from a broad scope in the GDPR. It's not only public research. Private research or publicly funded research are also covered by this exception. So private entities can also rely on this exception, and we usually and very commonly authorize private society companies to implement processing for developing AA solution. So for creating and for developing your AA solution, you can either create your own data set, or you can reuse an already existing data set. There is two main cases. The first one will be you are reusing already collected data, and these data are gathered or I lost my word, are conserved, no, not conserved, or stocked, no, sorry, stored, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Stored in, for example, healthcare establishment, the medical file, okay, so you can reuse it, or you can also reuse open access data sets that are made publicly available. These reuse are allowed by the GDPR, even if there is some requirements that must be met in order to reuse them. You, as the reuser, are not asked to check if the original controller, meaning the controller, the person that that collected the data, is compliant with the GDPR. But as a reuser, you're creating a new processing, and you need to make sure that your processing is compliant with the GDPR, information of individual, exercise of rights, etc., etc. I think this is the main up for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Aurore. Whoops. Is it? Ah, yes, too quick. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Aurore. When you have covered these legal grounds, then you will face some questions which are, I would say, techno-legal. And for example, the case of the minimization principle. And we are all aware that AI training will involve generally a very large amount of data, especially for deep learning, for example. And how do you handle this question of data minimization, and is it an obstacle to collect and process those data? Well, in fact, it is not an obstacle because this principle is relative to the purpose you pursue and to the constraint, the technical constraint you face. And so remember that data minimization is not intended to deplete your data set or to prevent you from using it. It's only intended to avoid over processing, processing of too many data or more data than necessary. And necessity is related to the purpose. So in the end, you have to document and justify choices you make about which data you will need relative to the purpose and how you will filter or sort the data and design the whole system. So remember, it is possible to handle large amount of data if it is correctly justified and documented. Also, the other question is the data retention period. Because GDPR, for example, says that you cannot keep data indefinitely, you have to define a retention period. But then again, we are aware that dataset creation is a very important asset in AI training, and that also you may want to keep this dataset for further comparison, for example, between algorithm, or maybe some dataset will even become some kind of standards to measure advance in technological proceedings. So how do you handle this principle? Well, then again, it has to be expressed in some way. You need to express the data retention limits, but it can be done in two ways. First, classically, you will say you will keep it 3 years, 5 years, etc. And also you can justify in a way that you will have a criteria, a trigger, a limit. For example, after I have tested 10 algorithms, the idea is that you are able to express the data retention period and relate it to the purpose again. The purpose is the main key to defining the data retention. Also, once you have settled these other questions, you go to the risk assessment and conformity assessment, the famous data protection impact assessment. And these are both related to the AI Act and to GDPR. For example, the AI Act will say that for high-risk systems, you will need to perform a DPIA, and you can document it both for GDPR and this Act. Also, if your system or the intended use of the system brings some risks of misuse or data breach or whatever, if there are significant risks per se from the system by itself, it will be a very good idea to carry out the DPIA. And if you are not sure, you have also some criteria that what we say is that 2 of these criteria are met, DPIA is very highly recommended. For example, if you process sensitive data, which is the case for the health sector, if you process personal data, mainly for patients, for example, and data of vulnerable persons, patients again are vulnerable, and data sets that are combined, that's also rather frequently the case, and if you apply new technological solutions, which is always the case nearly for AI. So as you see, just looking at the criteria, you will really mostly all of the time need to perform a DPIA. And then when you have identifying the risk, you will have to put measures in front of the risks. And so you have to keep in mind some security objectives. Of course, we all think about confidentiality of the data, of course, of the training data, but also remember that a trained model can retain some kind of personal data that some attacks are able to extract from the model. There are many publications about that. Also, you will have to look at the performance and integrity of the model once it is deployed. And as for any data processing, you will have to consider the global security of it, because even if the model is robust, even if the data was not biased, the system can be attacked to provide wrong answers, for example. So cybersecurity also is the main key. Just to have a little look at the different measures you can have, and also the different levels of measures. Of course, there will be measures that will be applied to the training data. First, you have to protect those data from classical cybersecurity attacks. Also, data minimizations will often translate into pseudonymization, which is that you don't need to have an email address or name or physical address of the people you are training your data on. So pseudonymization is really a key on this. And also, if the data is too sensitive, you can switch to synthetic data, but that's another topic. Also, as for any system, you will have to look at how you will develop it. And for example, look at the code library you're using. Are they safe? Are they secure? Are they performing well? You will have to audit your code, etc. And also, you have to anticipate deployment and have a look at how the system will be used. And also, if you need to explain the decisions, you will have to integrate something to do that. In the end, to wrap up, how do we apply all these principles and procedures to generative AI systems, since it is the topic of the day? Well, then again, you have to start by a purpose. You have to define your objective. You don't do GenAI just for fun. You have to comply to GDPR and have a specific purpose. Because this specific purpose will allow you to define the users, authorized or not authorized users. Also, you will have to take care, for example, through the DPIA, about the limitations and risks posed by the system. And for the deployment phase, you will have to choose a secure platform. And if you rely on third parties, handle how the third parties may or may not reuse your data or train models. Also, in the end, you will have end users that could be healthcare professionals, and they have to be trained then again on the intended use of the system and its limitations, which means that overall you need a global governance of your development and deployment phase, which will need to rely on your DPO, your CISO, your IT department, and of course your business departments. Thank you very much, and I hope this will give you the idea to go to the CNIL website, where you will find these practical sheets, these how-to sheets about deploying and developing AI systems. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.